A Future in the Past, the trilogy by Francisco Zaragoza Esbrí. First novel, A Future in the Past. Chapter 1. David Goodwill waited alone and silently. His gaze was vacant and unconcerned. His summer vacation was over. David sat in one of the uncomfortable chairs in the central lounge at Tampa Airport. It was 6 o'clock in the evening on Saturday, August 25, 2001. And his flight to New York was scheduled to depart at 8:15. David's face showed a pensive and absent expression. He was deeply immersed in himself and his thoughts. The obsessive passion that had kept him awake for more than 4 years was a study in modern cosmology about the anthropic principle of life. The announcement of his flight's departure was made over the loudspeakers. He got up and gathered all his belongings. He boarded the plane. He sat down and immediately closed his eyes. He didn't want to engage in idle conversation and pretended to be asleep. The flight attendant's voice brought him back to the mortal world when she asked him if he would like dinner. He turned his head without answering when he saw those deep, frightened black eyes. Something made him change his mind. They were black eyes that were not unfamiliar to him. "Yes, thank you very much, miss," David replied. After dinner, David wondered if the vacation could have changed him so much that he would react in such an unusual way. His plane landed on runway 2 at JFK, New York. After collecting his luggage, he took a taxi to his apartment in Brooklyn. Upon entering the house, his mother, Evelyn, asked him if he wanted dinner. David replied that he had already eaten and quickly went to his room. There, he downloaded the data from his laptop to his computer. Thanks to quantum mechanics, David had managed to close the loop on his research. He walked to his bedroom window and could see the moon shining, completely oblivious to his emotions. David stared at it for a few minutes in silence. And then, without taking his eyes off her, he asked, "Tell me, Moon, how long have you been there?" Chapter 2. David Goodwill returns to work, walking along the side of Fritz Koenig's sphere. The offices of Whitehall were located on the 93rd floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. David enters his workplace half an hour early after greeting the janitor. He downloads all his data into a quantum computer named Marco Polo. Marco Polo begins to give the first results. The values are extremely high. David wonders to himself if there will be found the key to time travel. David freezes the calculations and meets with John, his boss and friend. David and John review the pending work reports together. David makes the necessary phone calls with a colleague from the West Coast. John and David waiting to have lunch at the restaurant on the 97th floor of the South Tower. In the afternoon, at the end of the workday, John suggests to David that they go for drinks in the village. David declines the invitation, claiming he has a lot of work pending. John leaves the offices, joking about David's poor excuse. David goes back to input his data into Marco Polo, and the first results appear again. The Marco Polo screen displays numbers, equations, and a flashback to Einstein. David returns home on the subway. An untimely blackout delays his arrival. As he walks down the street among the crowd, his mind continues to debate the results. 2 sentences from Marco Polo keep crossing his mind. The moment and the place are everything, and the maximum jump is 37 years. Chapter 3. On Wednesday, September 5, it was the day chosen by David Goodwill to test his theory. David was convinced that teleportation allowed for a jump in the temporal plane. According to Marco Polo, a strong electromagnetic field would be needed to make a leap into the future. Consequently, the amount of energy required would also be enormous. David had brought with him a small box hidden among his clothing. The little box had a very special guest, his pet Popey, a little hamster. Upon arriving at his workplace, David decided to go up 2 more floors. David entered the power generation room and connected the reserve transformer, and David caused a short circuit with an iron bar. David knew that the electric arc generated would last a short time. He brought the little box closer so that it would disappear, dragged by the cessation of the electric arc. When the little box disappeared, David spoke a few words in a low voice. "Have a good trip, Popey. I hope you arrive safely. See you in 3 weeks." David ran into Jack, the janitor, as he was going down the stairs. Jack informed him that he was going up to check what had happened. David told him it wasn't necessary because he had already checked it was a problem with the supply company. The rest of that day and the work week went without any noteworthy incidents. Saturday, September 8, dawned sunny in Brooklyn. David told to his mother that he was going to mail a letter and buy something testimonial. His mother linked everything to the recent trip to Tampa and smiled with satisfaction. David left his apartment to mingle and disappear among the crowd. Chapter 4. At the end of the day, on Monday, September 10, 2001, David surprised John by inviting him to have the drinks they had pending since the end of August. They parked the car in the village and walked to Bleecker Street. They entered the popular Kenny's and took a seat. "What's her name?" John asked. "I don't know what you're talking about," David replied. "You're a terrible liar," John added. "You might be right," David admitted. "Tell me at least if she has blue eyes." "I love blue eyes," John confessed. "They're not blue, John. They are deep and precious black eyes. I can't tell you anything more," David said to close the topic. The conversation continued as rounds of drinks came one after another. David returned home by subway. Upon seeing him, his mother sensed her son had drunk too much, but she didn't mind. Tomorrow she would ask him for more details about his girl. Now was not the best time. On Tuesday, September 11, 2001, David entered the Whitehall offices at 8:10 a.m. He immediately headed to the coffee vending machine to get a strong coffee. He returned to his desk and started drinking it. He noticed it was very hot and set it back down on the table. At 8:23 a.m., John arrived. "How was your night?" David asked. "Terrible. We overdid it yesterday," John replied. "Many times a night is not just a night," David asserted. "Really? Do you think that what you said makes sense?" John asked, very surprised. "For the most part, I think so," David said. "I'm going to get a coffee, see if I can wake up. I almost didn't come to work," John said. "On the other hand, I was sure that you would do it," said David. It was 8:32 a.m. when John came out into the hallway. At 8:38 a.m., John returned with the coffee and sat down in front of David. "I notice you're tense," said John. "I wouldn't know what to answer you," David answered. "Those black eyes have affected you too much," said John. "I think you are right," accepted David. "This time, you have hit." David couldn't finish the sentence. It was 8:46 a.m. when the entire North Tower shook. The coffee spilled over the table, and screams began to be heard everywhere. David and John approached the north-facing windows of the floor. A thick black smoke was rising on that side. It was undeniable that the explosion that had caused the tremor had also started a fire on the lower floors, said David. "We're trapped. The elevators aren't working," people shouted, running uncontrollably. "It's getting terribly hot," said John. "That's true. Follow me," shouted David. "Where to?" John asked. "Just follow me and don't ask questions," David replied. David and John ascended the stairs, with many other people. During the ascent, David noticed that the power room on the 95th floor was inactive. There was no light and nothing was working. Every minute that passed, more people ascended alongside the two of them. This caused David to lose sight of John for a few moments. He spotted him again when he saw him running on the 103rd floor and joined him. Together they headed towards the windows on the north side. The smoke obscured everything. They decided to go towards the windows on the south side. It was 9:02 a.m. when John and David saw an airplane approaching from the south side. The airplane was flying very low, and the direction of its flight was the South Twin Tower. "What is that crazy guy doing?" exclaimed John, just seconds before the United Airlines plane crashed directly into the South Twin Tower at 9:03 a.m. "Did you see that?" "Do you think the same has happened to our tower?" asked John. "I'm afraid so," David replied tersely. "In that case, we have no way out." "We're lost," murmured John. "There's always a way out." "Follow me," shouted David. The two resumed their ascent up the stairs. Their survival instinct was pushing them to do it. They arrived at the roof tube. There were many people on it. "No one can get us out of here. It's the end," said John. "You've always been an exaggerator. Come with me," David urged. "This time, no. I've already made my decision," said John. "John, no!" shouted David, seeing his friend jump into the void. It was 9:59 a.m., and although David possessed the secret to traveling in time, he remained trapped in space. Desperation was the common denominator among those around him. Some had followed John's example. At 10:05 a.m., a deafening noise startled everyone from the southeast. David turned and saw that the South Tower had vanished. A cloud of dust had taken its place. It was impossible to breathe. It was impossible to stay on the rooftop. David was about to leave when his eyes fixed on the antenna atop the North Tower. How had he not noticed the antenna before? He asked himself. It was 9 a.m. when David left the rooftop and headed to the antenna's power room. He was surprised to see that it was fully operational. By 10:18 a.m., David managed to open the electrical cabinets. At 10:22 a.m., he found an iron bar and tried to cause a short circuit, but failed. At 10:24 a.m., he tried again. He succeeded, and the voltaic arc appeared. David approached it and used a wooden stick to turn off the main switch. The arc disappeared after shining intensely, and darkness filled the room. Darkness was followed by a void, but the void did not represent the absence of energy, and the energy simply transformed, fulfilling the immutable law of its conservation. The light appeared, and then it changed color. The light changed to illuminate a new day. Chapter 5. The first thing David heard was the chords of God Bless America, then some gunfire, and finally, a deathly silence. David asked himself, where am I? And what had happened? David opened the door slightly to look outside. He looked left and right but couldn't recognize anything. He closed the door again. He decided to stay still and sharpen his hearing. The silence was complete until a faint noise broke it. A minute later, the noise repeated and David located. Oh, that came from the bottom of a shelf. He approached and could see a box. He couldn't believe it. It was his box, and the noises were caused by Poppy moving. David petted his pet and put him in the front pocket of his shirt. David opened the door again and decided to go to his right, when suddenly he began to hear voices. When people approaching, David quickly hid in a toilet of a service room. Then he could hear 3 female voices entering the service room. One of them said, 28 years have passed, and we keep doing the same thing. It was a tragedy, said the second voice. I wasn't born, added the third. When the voices disappeared, David decided to go out. He chose the left hallway and found another door. A sign indicated that it led to the emergency stairs on level 101. Memories flooded his thoughts again as he descended 7 floors. On level 94, he found a door that led to the elevators. He opened it and was able to enter a room there were 8 elevators. He stood in front of number 8 and pressed the down button. The touch of his index finger on the elevator button caused a beam of red lights to block the door through which he had entered. I was trapped in the past, and I escaped to continue being trapped in the future, he said to himself. When red lights disappear, 4 big guys approached him and placed a necklace around his neck. Where am I? David asked. Don't be funny and identify yourself, the boss of the agents ordered. Chapter 6. David found himself in a virtual dungeon. He remembered being transported first by car and then by speedboat. He was lying on the floor, unable to move, restrained by a necklace around his neck. He didn't know why he was there, but he wasn't alone. He tried to summarize his situation. According to the 3 female voices he had heard in the services, he was in the year 2029. He was sure his arrest was triggered by the analysis of his fingerprint when he pressed the elevator button. He strained his eyes as much as he could. There were no guards in the room. The callers were the real guards, causing the desired level of paralysis at any moment. David was desperate, wondering when this futuristic nightmare would end. Suddenly, he heard a voice inside him shouting, "You are not alone. You have Poppy with you." David quickened his breathing so Poppy would leave his pocket and position himself between the 2 balls of the necklace. He was sure he only needed a couple of seconds to break free, if Poppy could interrupt the circuit. He increased his breathing again when he realized someone else, beside him, was doing the same. He accelerated his breathing as much as he could and saw Poppy rise in the right direction. A few seconds later, his pet was positioned between the necklace's balls. The necklace was deactivated, and David was free. David noticed that he could move his arms. He took off the collar and put Poppy back in the pocket of his shirt. He observed that there were 100 people lying on the ground who all seemed to be asleep, all except one, because his companion in respiratory struggles was staring at him with wide-open eyes. He was a young man of color who was pleading for help with his gaze. David approached him and took off the collar, after making a gesture for him to be silent. They went outside, and he checked that they were near the sea, in a kind of pier. What time must it be? David asked. I estimate it's around 4 in the morning, his companion replied. Where are we? David asked again. This is Ellis Island, my friend. Or, if you prefer, this is Deportation Gate. Who are you that knows nothing? Are you a damn infiltrator? How did you manage to get rid of the collar all by yourself? My name is David, and I haven't gotten rid of the necklace on my own. What year are we in? Come on now. Are you trying to entertain us? I'm leaving and I don't want you to follow me, exclaimed the young black man. David reacted immediately and spoke again. I hope you believe what I'm going to tell you, he said. You have 30 seconds to do it. If you don't convince me, I will leave, the young man threatened. Less than 24 hours ago, I was having coffee in my office, David began. What's so special about that? The young man interrupted again. The special thing about my story is that my office was located on the 93rd floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. I don't know what day it is, but yesterday for me, it was September 11, 2001. What did you say? Exclaimed the young colored man. Hey, just tell me, how did you take off your necklace? I haven't done it alone. My pet has helped me, David responded, taking Popey out of his shirt pocket. Where did that come from? It's been over 15 years since they were all exterminated for causing a pandemic. Well, look at it carefully. This friend is called Popey, and he also comes from 2001, said David. My name is Leroy, the young man finally said. Tell me, Leroy, what day is it today? David asked. We just opened on September 12, 2029, Leroy responded. Incredible, David exclaimed. I have an idea. I want you to see something, said Leroy, climbing to the highest part of the breakwater. David followed Leroy, and when he reached Leroy and could see the landscape, he covered his mouth with his hands. When did you build this? David asked with eyes full of tears. Calm down, friend. That's not important now. The important thing now is to escape from here. Come on, Leroy proposed. Come on, David responded, petting his pet on the outside of his shirt. Chapter 7. Leroy's escape strategy turned out to be perfect. It was 8 hours and 30 minutes when the two ascended the Twund, New York Avenue. This part looks like it hasn't changed much, said Leroy, as they headed toward Central Park at 60th Street. What year were you born? David asked Leroy. I was born in 2006. I just turned 23, Leroy answered. And you, David, how old are you? I have. Or rather, yesterday I was 33 years old. I should be 61 now, but I'm still 33. How many people died in the 2001 attacks? David continued asking. Almost 3, 0 at the World Trade Center, 260 on the affected flights, and 120 at the Pentagon. At the Pentagon? David asked, surprised. Yes, and there was still a 4th plane, apparently headed to the White House, that was aborted by the passengers. David and Leroy continued up 5th Avenue until they left Central Park and entered the Harlem neighborhood. Is it no longer dangerous to walk in this area? David asked. I think that's how it was in the past, but now, not anymore, Leroy answered. They continued walking up the streets. I never dared to come this far, David said when he reached 173rd Street. We're in the Bronx, aren't we? Leroy nodded silently. They reached 175th Street, and Leroy knocked on a door with his knuckles in a certain sequence. A young black girl opened the door for them. They entered the house and went down to the basement. There they entered a room. Inside, a clock projected the time on the wall in red digits. It was 14 hours and 47 minutes. Here we can talk in peace, said Leroy, activating a giant screen. An image appeared on the screen and asked, Who is the intruder? He is completely trustworthy, Uncle Sam, replied Leroy. He has no papers and needs them, he added later. Leroy instructed David to place his palm on the orange circle that appeared on the screen. David obeyed. Leroy proposed to David that he could explain how he had managed to escape from the North Tower. David recounted his experience from his forced vacation in Tampa to the total confusion on the morning of 9/11. So you have a degree in physics, commented Leroy. Indeed, although now I don't know if I still am. But tell me something about yourself, David suggested. As I already told you, I was born in 2006, and I was selected because my DNA was free of genetic anomalies, Leroy began explaining. That allowed me to access a very special training, Leroy continued explaining. And at the age of 16, I received my bachelor's degrees in medicine, nuclear biology, and stratomolecular physics. Leroy ended by saying, In that case, it turns out that I am facing a genius, David exclaimed. But then, why were you detained on that island? David kept asking, very surprised. Leroy didn't answer. He got up, opened a drawer, and said, Look, the documents have arrived. How have you done this? David asked. Have you already forgotten what you have done? Leroy said, smiling. David accepted the joke and wondered aloud if his mother was still alive. Uncle Sam will find out, stated Leroy. Do you feel like going out? Now we are birds with new roles and without negative feathers, Leroy proposed. You really are a good bird, said David. What are you saying? Leroy asked, perplexed. Forget it. It was just a joke from the past, David said. Chapter 8. Uncle Sam reported that Evelyn Goodwill, David's mother, had died on April 4, 2014. David received the news with pain. In just 48 hours, his consciousness had gone from being able to hug her to knowing that she had been dead for more than 15 years. It was the morning of Friday, November 9, when Leroy entered the basement room. David had been living at Leroy and Martha's house for almost 2 months, barely going outside. He had spent all that time trying to catch up with the help of Uncle Sam. What do you plan to do today? Leroy asked. Aren't you thinking of staying another day locked down here? No, certainly not, David answered, stammering. In that case, I'm going to take you to a meeting. You will meet very interesting people, but don't even think about telling them your story. Okay, as you say, David accepted. It is an informal congress of scientific intellectuals to evaluate the level of basic cybernetic culture. What concepts does this technology now encompass? And in what capacity do you attend? David asked. Weren't you a person persecuted by justice? He added. I am the commissioner for Northern New York. My name for this occasion is Glenn Denvers. How many other personalities do you have? David wanted to know. A few. You'll check it out, said Leroy. And do you think it is convenient for me to attend? David asked. I consider it strictly necessary. I want you to meet a person and tell me your opinion about him. Besides, Uncle Sam has already registered you as a commissioned member of the West Zone. When will I be able to know the whole truth about you? You already know a lot about it. By the way, have you managed to find out anything else about your Californian colleague? Nothing that is definitive, David admitted. Where did you tell me you worked? Leroy asked. At the Whitehall Research Corporation, reported David. Is this company still operational? No. Uncle Sam has confirmed to me that he closed doors in 2004. The Western delegation was unable to resist on its own. What will be my role in today's meeting? David wanted to know. Just observe with your sixth sense the guy that I will point out to you. So I will do it. One more thing, Leroy, said David. When I want to delve into technical research topics, Uncle Sam tells me I'm not authorized. True. I have been able to read it in your reports, and I have already issued the order that you can access everything without restrictions. Fantastic, David exclaimed. However, a small problem has arisen. Leroy informed before David's expectant look. After you placed your hand in the orange circle to obtain documents, Leroy began explaining. Uncle Sam continued investigating and found out that your DNA was the same as that of a person who disappeared in the 9/11 attacks. And, furthermore, he found that the ages and names also coincided. He asked me for explanations. Leroy ended up explaining. And you? What have you told him? David asked, worried. I answered that I didn't know anything. Gee, how complicated this future is, David said. You don't know it well, Leroy confirmed. It's time to leave for Congress, he added. Chapter 9. The person that David observed during the Congress turned out to be a man of about 40 years old, with nothing to highlight in his behavior. The character to be watched arrived alone and also left alone. Congress revalued David's personal ego, as he was able to follow it perfectly. However, it was another fact that caught his attention. From the first moment he saw her enter, David couldn't take his eyes off her. She was wearing a simple dark-colored trench coat, which she placed on the cloakroom counter. She immediately headed towards the two of them. Good afternoon, Dr. Denvers, she greeted. Good afternoon, Jennifer, Leroy responded. Let me introduce you to David Goodwill. He's a colleague of ours from California. He will attend the Congress as a guest, he lied. Welcome to New York, Dr. Goodwill. Will you stay among us for many days? I don't know, but I think so. It all depends on... David tried to explain. Jennifer Bailey is the commissioner of Jersey City, and is also an authority on the events of the tragic 9/11. Don't exaggerate, Dr. Denvers, said Jennifer. I can assure you that I am not exaggerating at all, said Leroy to a silent David. See you later, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure, said Jennifer, addressing the Congress room. David kept an eye on her during the more than 2 hours that the event lasted. Some seats separated them, but their gazes met at least 3 times. He lost sight of her when the act was over. Leroy and David returned by taxi to the house in the Bronx. Martha greeted them with a surprise, but with a serious face. It was a special day because she was turning 22 years old. I'm sorry. I had forgotten, said Leroy. I'm sorry too, David added. You couldn't know it, David, but he have no choice. She reproached his companion. Excuse me, but I have to go down to the basement to enter congressional data for Uncle Sam. You see how you have no choice. Don't be late. 5 minutes and I take the food out of the oven. Leroy disappeared and returned with a huge bundle that he placed on Martha's empty chair. When Martha came in and saw the package, she screamed with joy. You have no choice but never change, she said with tears in his eyes. Martha opened the package and discovered a stuffed animal with a watch phone in one of its hands. It's beautiful, she said, kissing Leroy. And even though it's not his birthday, I also bought another one for David. After dinner, we'll explain how it works, if he still has his head on straight. Why do you say that? Martha asked. You better ask by whom, Leroy pointed out. Today I introduced David to Jennifer Bailey. She's very pretty, said Martha. He has wonderful black eyes, David admitted. Weren't there beauties like Jennifer in your time? Leroy asked. What does your time mean? Martha exclaimed. David is already an old man. He is over 30 years old, Leroy concealed. Martha was gone for a moment. David took the opportunity to ask, Does Martha know my true story? Assuming your story is true, only I know it, Leroy answered. Where did you hide the stuffed animal and the watches? David wanted to know. I just bought it. Uncle Sam has behaved like a real magician, Leroy clarified. Martha is absolutely right, David exclaimed. I know, I have no choice, Leroy admitted. Chapter 10. Jennifer called Leroy on her cell phone and asked, Is the Californian colleague still here? I think so, Leroy responded, without giving importance to his answer. Could you contact him? Jennifer asked. Of course, but if you prefer to do it yourself, I can give you his mobile phone number. I'd rather you do it, Doctor. Do not hesitate to give him my mobile number. Leroy told David about Jennifer's call. David could not hide his joy. Leroy went down to the basement and found that he was alone. He sat down across from Uncle Sam and entered a code. An image appeared on the screen, and Leroy said, We can conclude the first phase of the program. When has it happened? Asked the image. I just gave Jennifer's cell phone number to David, Leroy informed. Excellent, the image answered before leaving. David took a deep breath and called Jennifer. I'm glad you called, Dr. Goodwill, she said. Dr. Denvers gave me your number, David reported. Call me, Jennifer, I beg you, she asked. I will do if you call me David, he responded. When are you coming back to California? Jennifer asked. I will still be in New York for a few more days, he confirmed. I would like to contrast opinions about 9/11. I'm not an expert, but I'd love to debate with you. I suggest we meet next Saturday, the 17th. I'm delighted. David accepted. In that case, I'll pick you up with my car at 11 o'clock. Perfect. See you Saturday, David said by way of farewell. As he hung up the phone, David asked himself, how old would Jennifer be today? Could they both have coincided in another dimension of space-time, although at very different ages? This thought hammered his head nonstop. Leroy arrived home and interrupted David's internal debate. Would you like to play a game of freewheel? David accepted, but made the following condition. The winner can ask the loser whatever he wants. The loser must respond as broadly as the winner wishes, and always without violating the truth. Okay, I have understood it perfectly. I'm going to win every game. Prepare to respond, Leroy boasted. The first game was won by Leroy, and he asked, Did you go out with a girl in 2001? No, David answered briefly. You said the answers would be comprehensive. Leroy protested. I can't expand on anything because it had no relationship, David responded. Leroy also won the second game and asked, would you go back to the past if you could? That is, to the year 2001? Right now, my answer is yes, David acknowledged. David won the third game. How do you spend your time, Leroy asked. Working, answered the loser. What do you work at? David insisted. I am a kind of expert who is consulted by various societies that depend on the state. And then, why were you detained on that island? Sorry, this question does not correspond to the original question. Martha entered the room announcing dinner. Who's winning? She asked as she saw the freewheel dashboard. Me for 2-1, Leroy quickly answered. True, but we're not done yet, David stated. I'm sorry to say that for today we are done, said Leroy, collecting the pieces of the game. I have to prepare the presentation of a conference on operational techniques with next-generation lasers. Do you also understand that? David wanted to know. I just have to prepare the presentation of the event for a good friend of mine, Leroy informed. Dr. Frederick Newman, said Martha. Would you like to attend the presentation tomorrow, David? I prefer to stay to continue in my purpose, answered the aforementioned. You lose it, Leroy said. I know, but observing your frenetic activity, I don't doubt that I will have other opportunities, David answered with clear signs of a second intention in his words. Let's have dinner, Martha said. You are behaving like two rude children. Chapter 11. Good morning, David. I parked on the corner. I'll wait for you. Good morning, Jennifer. Right now, I go down. David walked down the stairs, mentally reviewing what he would answer to Jennifer if she asked him his age. He had decided to add 5 years to give more credence to what he could tell about the morning of 9/11. David walked towards Jennifer's car with his hands in his pockets to hide his nervousness. Good morning again, David said as he got into the car. Jennifer extended her hand to him and he reciprocated. She sported sunglasses as aerodynamic as her car. I think the best thing to contrast opinions will be for us to go to the scene of the events, she suggested. It seems very appropriate to me, David accepted. Jennifer parked in the village and left her glasses in the car. David could see those disturbing black eyes again. They began to walk in silence. David politely gave her the right side. You're very quiet, he said. Your behavior surprised me, she stated. Have I done something inappropriate? David asked fearfully. Sometimes I get carried away by my other great passion, which is none other than psychology, she confessed. Does that mean that I will be analyzed at all times? How have you planned the day? David asked. The first thing we will do is sit on this bench. I want to ask you questions and see your face when you answer. More psychoanalysis? David asked. Did someone you knew die on 9/11? She asked. Did the attacks leave traces on you that are difficult to erase? Yes, without a doubt, David admitted. Me, too, she admitted also by surprise. To you? How could they mark you? David quickly exclaimed. Surely you weren't even born that day. I was already born. That day I was a little over a month old, Jennifer stated. In that case, you can't even remember it, David said. Do you believe in coincidences? Jennifer asked. I didn't believe it, but lately I'm starting to believe, David said. A few days after I was born, I was discovered to have a coronary heart disease. My operation was scheduled for the morning of 9/11. The events overwhelmed the hospitals, and my operation was postponed for 2 weeks. The surgeon who operated on me believes that those 15 days and the old techniques used could cause problems in the future. But you feel good now, right? David asked. Perfectly, Jennifer answered. How long have you known Denvers? David asked to change the subject. He was my teacher and my applied cybernetics examiner. David decided to change the topic of the conversation again. I would like to see the place where the names of those who died on 9/11 are engraved. Jennifer noticed this and wanted to find out why. It's on the other side. We can walk while we talk, she suggested with hidden cunning. Where were you born, David? She asked out of the blue. I'm a New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn, David answered. Can I make a request of you? She said with a seductive voice. I am eager to please you with whatever you ask me, he responded, absorbed by the black eyes. Will you allow me to take your arm? She whispered, with the hidden intention of better calibrating his reactions. Of course. David answered. Are you married? She asked directly. Not me. What about you? David asked with a heavy heart. Me neither, she answered. Where did you study? She insisted on her goal of finding out everything about him. At Columbia University, here in New York. When did you go to California? She insisted, intensifying the pressure of her arm. About 3 or 4 years ago, David answered doubtfully. What city do you live in now? She asked. In Los Angeles. David took a while to respond. But the Western headquarters are in San Diego, Jennifer argued. David reacted and said, True, but I am assigned to the Los Angeles area, and I confess that now my wish is to return to New York, David stated, looking at Jennifer. Do you think the terrorists chose the impact floors to make the towers collapse? Jennifer asked. I don't believe it. My opinion is that everything turned out better than they had planned. After eating, the two walked through the well-known Ground Zero. David could read his friend John's name. David also thought about his mother. He imagined the times she had caressed his name. Jennifer remained respectful of David's actions at all times. It was 6 in the afternoon when Jennifer dropped David off at the same corner where she had picked him up. At the farewell, their hands refused to separate, trying to absorb the essence of each other. Martha and Leroy arrived at 7. They quickly realized that David didn't really want to talk. David had mixed feelings. He was over the moon about his meeting with Jennifer. He was mad at Leroy. What means that false name? And why had he introduced him to Jennifer? Had it been the Congress a chance, or was it also prepared by Leroy? And finally, he was wary of Martha. Was she also involved in this whole mess of lies? Have you agreed on many theories? Leroy asked. We have agreed on almost everything, David responded, turning to Martha and asking her, Tell me, Martha, what does Leroy's name mean if his name is really Glenn? Martha smiled and said, It would be better if he explained it to you. It's a story that belongs to my childhood and that affected me, said Leroy. David retired to his room after hearing Leroy's poor explanation but chose not to delve into it. He hasn't explained anything to us about his meeting, Martha stated. That's not important. I am much more concerned about the suspicious state in which he finds himself. Why do you say it's not important? Martha wanted to know. Because I have it all recorded? The watch phone I gave him is an excellent transmitter. You are incorrigible, said Martha. The end justifies the means, Leroy responded. Always? Martha insisted. Not always, but in this case, yes, Leroy stated emphatically. Chapter 12. Uncle Sam had located Gerald Campbell, David's Californian colleague. The summary of the information was as follows. The attacks and the closure of Whitehall affected Gerald. His meticulous brain did a 180-degree turn. He went from being intelligent and jovial to being obtuse and distrustful. His wife abandoned him, and in February 2005, Gerald was secluded in a care center for the mentally ill. When David received the information from Uncle Sam, Leroy was by his side. What do you plan to do now? Leroy asked. I'm determined to go talk to him, David responded. Do you think that will help you? Uncle Sam's report makes it clear that this man is crazy, argued Leroy. I don't know, but Gerald is the only link I have left with my past, and I have no right to ignore him, said David. And what are you going to tell Jennifer? Leroy insisted. I don't mind confessing to you that I care a lot about that girl. This trip will help me kill 2 birds with 1 stone. On the one hand, I will be able to see Gerald, and on the other hand, I will tell her that I have gone to request my transfer to New York. That will normalize my presence here, David ended up saying. How many days do you plan to be there? Leroy asked. Only those strictly necessary, David specified. When do you plan to leave? Leroy wanted to know. Tomorrow, David answered. One more thing, Leroy. I need to know if drugs are still used in those centers. Drug use is restricted. They are only authorized in cases of great aggressiveness, Leroy answered. I'm going to need 20 cubic centimeters of the 2 substances that cancel the effect of those drugs, David asked. Okay. Uncle Sam will prepare everything you have asked for and provide you with the money you need. Would you like to play a game of freewheel? Leroy added. I can't today. I'm meeting Jennifer, and I'm already late. I want Jennifer to accompany me to do some errands, David informed. Say hi to Jennifer for me, said Leroy. When Leroy was left alone, he typed a code into Uncle Sam. An image appeared on the screen. We have serious problems, reported Leroy. Dr. Goodwill wants to go visit Gerald Campbell, Leroy informed. You have to stop him, said the image. Is there anything I should know? Leroy asked strangely. The story that Uncle Sam has told you about Gerald Campbell is not entirely accurate. I was afraid of it, Leroy exclaimed. It is true that he is confined in a mental sanatorium, but the real reason is not what Uncle Sam told you. The truth is that Gerald became an activist and organized many protests against the government. I wonder if things can get more complicated for us, Leroy murmured. The answer is yes, admitted the screen image. When we started to find out things about Gerald Campbell, we discovered that 7 months ago he inherited just over $350 million due to the death of an uncle. And? Leroy asked anxiously. Well, now his wife has re-entered the scene and claims to be the executor of the estate. And how can this affect us? Leroy asked. To put the icing on the cake, we have discovered that the man Gerald's wife now lives with. He is the director of the center where Gerald Campbell is being held. My mother! Leroy exclaimed. David goes straight into the lion's den without knowing it. We will send Ingrid Tullen, said the image. She will know what to do at all times. She will travel on the same plane as David. By the way, where is Goodwill? Is he wearing the watch you gave him? Asked the image. We are not receiving any transmissions, added the image. I'm going to make sure, said Leroy, going up the stairs. At that same moment, David, accompanied by Jennifer, was in the back room of a jewelry store that served as a cover. I want 2 20-milliliter bottles of these 2 substances and a box of hypodermic needles, he said, handing over a piece of paper. In total, it will be $420, said the dealer. David placed the money on a tray. Jennifer was scared, but she felt satisfied. She had been able to help David, and that made her feel good. Leroy went back to the basement and said, David has forgotten his watch. I estimate that it will be essential to call an extraordinary council meeting for the day after tomorrow, said the image. We must debate the new situation, and we must also assess the new risks that have emerged, added the image on the screen. Chapter 13. David had his eyes closed. It was his favorite tactic on airplanes. Ingrid Tullen sat 3 rows back. David knew that Uncle Sam's report was not accurate. David knew that Gerald had fought for his deceased co-workers, and for the families of these co-workers. David had placed the antidotes and syringes in a toiletry bag inside the checked luggage at the terminal. The trip was going to take just over 3 hours. His plane would land in San Diego at 2 noon on Monday, December 10, 2029. David mentally reviewed his entire plan. David would make a maximum of 3 visits to Gerald. In the first, he would try to confirm the true identity of his interlocutor. He didn't want to be fooled. At this point, Jennifer's help had been crucial. She had gotten him a very small DNA analyzer. David had taken it apart and inserted it into a blood glucose monitor with a printer output port. The objective of the first visit was very clear: obtain a drop of blood to confirm identity. The second, to check Gerald's mental state, and the third depended on the result of the previous 2. On Tuesday, December 11, David arrived to the County Psychiatric Center. A few minutes later, a guard announced, "Visit for Gerald Campbell, room number 5. David entered the room and could see a man in acceptable physical condition with his hands tied by a strap. I'm a journalist and I'm doing a survey, said David. What things interest you, Mr. Campbell? David got no answer, but he continued to insist. Tell me about Whitehall. What happened? Gerald looked up at David but remained silent. Why are you still locked up in this place? He insisted. Who are you? Gerald suddenly asked. In the eyes of others, I am a journalist. But, for you, I am a friend who wants to help you. I'm crazy and crazy people don't have friends, said Gerald. Please leave, or I'll call the guard. Don't do it, Gerald, David pleaded. I just want to help you get out of here. The change in tone managed to make an impression on Gerald. David decided to get to the point. I need a drop of your blood to confirm that you really are Gerald Campbell. I'm Gerald Campbell, and I've spent half my life locked up here for standing up to power, Gerald protested. There are just a few minutes left until the visit ends. I need to take a drop of your blood, and I promise you that if you are Gerald Campbell, I will return. David ended up assuring. Gerald stood up. He pretended to stumble and fell on his face. During the fall, the strap buckle pin got stuck. David came to her aid, turning his back on the guard, and collected the blood sample. You have to go. "The visit is over," said the guard. David and Gerald's gazes met for a moment. They couldn't say anything to each other, but it wasn't necessary. David left County Psychiatric Center. Ingrid saw him leave and started the car. David watched the blue Corvette move. Upon arriving at the hotel, he again saw the same Corvette, parked in the parking lot. "We're all here," he exclaimed as he entered the hotel. Chapter 14. DNA analysis confirmed the identity of Gerald Campbell. David decided not to leave the hotel and dedicated himself to planning the second visit. At that same moment, on the East Coast, the 15 members of the Council of the Rainbow Travelers were meeting. Its president, Surgeon Patrick Emmerichs, headed the horseshoe-shaped table. To his right was the first vice president, biologist Dean Devlin. To his left is the second vice president, the multi-laureate Dr. Glenn Denvers. At 8 o'clock in the afternoon, the meeting began. The president announced that Glenn Denvers was going to expose, first of all, an exceptional event that occurred 3 months ago. He also reported that the second point of the day was going to be Dean Devlin's presentation of a great project, which would then be submitted to debate and vote. The vice president, Glenn Denvers, stood up and spoke. "I'll go back to September 5th, he began by saying. "That day, I made a routine jump into my 14-day future. The place of departure and destination were the same. I chose the left room in my basement for this. When I was about to report the results to Uncle Sam, I had a big surprise. I found a stranger talking to Uncle Sam. When he saw me enter, he greeted me without being surprised. 'Hello, Leroy. Are you back yet?' I answered yes. I had no choice. I was in my future, and for the first time I was truly facing the unknown. Little by little, I convinced him to repeat his story to me, with the excuse of being able to have it recorded in Uncle Sam. This is the full recorded testimony of that man, made on Wednesday, September 19 at 7:47 p.m. The document lasts 37 minutes, he specified, connecting his watch to the headphone circuit on the table. I ask you to listen to it in silence without interruption. Then, if you consider it appropriate, we will repeat it." As David's recorded voice progressed in his story, the faces reflected surprise and eagerness to ask questions. Dr. Walter Andrews requested a repeat. Glenn Denvers pressed play again. At the end of the second audition, the questions began. The president decided that they would be carried out in order of seniority. "When did you get back, Glenn?" asked Dr. Stephen McCormack, graduate in biomolecular chemistry. "I spent 4 hours talking with Dr. David Goodwill. It was very difficult for me to abandon the experience." Stuart Weinstein, a professor at Columbia University, asked, "Weren't you taking too much risk by allowing yourself to be detained?" The decision to do so was made by Patrick, Dean, and myself. It was the only solution that guaranteed us 100% success. "Why did you trust that man?" "Could he have been a rogue hacker?" asked astronomer Ralph Kingsley. "In less than 48 hours, we conduct an investigation of his life. As surprising as it may seem to us, it was all true," asked Leroy. Michael Parker, professor of exact sciences, asked, "What have we learned from this experience?" "The method used by Goodwill is very different from ours. It has more risks, but the jump achieved is terrifying." Jeff Richards, an expert in quantum physics, wanted to know if anyone on the council knew David. Glenn's response surprised everyone when he claimed to have taken Goodwill to a cybernetics congress. The theological engineer, Howard Moore, asked, "How could you conceal on that island everything you already knew?" "It wasn't easy for me, but I had to do it. I put problems into what he said, and that gave him confidence." "Where has he lived these 3 months?" asked Walter Andrews. "At my home. We considered this to be the best solution." "Where is he now?" "Why hasn't he come?" Roland Davison wanted to know. "We would have made him an honorary member," he added. "He's in San Diego," Leroy responded briefly. "He has gone to visit a coworker." Anthropologist Thomas Brenner asked if David had confessed to having undergone any changes in his nature after the 28-year jump. Leroy's response was negative, and added that David Goodwill had a memory worth highlighting. Psychologist Rick Carter asked, "Has this experience had any reflection on your personality, Dr. Denvers?" "I hope not in my personality, but yes, in my mentality. Now I know that everything we have done has been worth it." The last one to ask was Scott Evans. The question did not surprise anyone. "Which of you three can explain to me the reason why have you hidden this event for 3 months?" taking into account that our statutes required them to do so within a maximum of 10 days? President Patrick Emmerichs responded bluntly. Extraordinary events demand extraordinary decisions. The second point on the agenda is postponed for 2 days. We will meet again here and at the same time. That's all. Good evening, gentlemen. Chapter 15. The sun was shining in the California sky as David headed, for the second time, to the county psychiatric center. He went into the reception and filled out the application. Ingrid Tullen came on 3 minutes later and did the same. Ingrid's visit was announced first. Shortly after, the guard said, "Visit from Gerald Campbell, room number 3. "I confirm that you are the real Gerald Campbell," said David. "And you won't be a vulture? Scavenging inheritances? What have you called me? What heritage are you talking about? I can't believe you don't know anything." "We are going very badly," said Gerald. "Do they give you pills, Gerald?" David asked. "I'm not going to answer anything before I know who you are. Who in New York's Whitehall did you have the most contact with?" "You continue with the questions. Didn't you hear what I told you?" At that moment, 4 floors above, Dr. Gilman entered his office and reviewed the pending tasks. "I need your answers to cement mine," said David. "I was only related to John Carpenter," Gerald answered. "Anyone else?" David insisted. "Personally, with no one else, but I spoke several times by phone with one of his collaborators," said Gerald. "His name was David Goodwill. Another good person who couldn't fulfill his dreams. But I admit that John's death affected me a lot." Gerald Campbell ended up confessing. "Me too," David admitted. "Was he related to you?" Gerald wanted to know. "It affected me a lot because I was at his side when he decided to jump into the void from the roof of the North Tower," said David. "What did you just say?" Gerald asked, very surprised. On the 4th floor, Gilman could not help but be astonished. He had just read that Gerald Campbell had been visited twice by the same journalist, and that the imposter was still in the center. Gerald was waiting for David's response when he saw the guard place his hand on the receiver in his ear. There was no doubt that he was receiving orders. Ingrid also realized and went out into the hallway, screaming that she had been attacked. The guard did not know where to go. David and Gerald wasted no time. "Change your wound dressing for this other one," David said, handing a new one to Gerald. "I won't see you again," Gerald whispered, very affected. "I have to go. Tonight we will talk," David informed. "What?" Gerald said. David didn't answer. He placed a finger on his lips and then pointed to the dressing Gerald had just applied. David walked out into the hallway. Dr. Gilman was stuck in the hallway thanks to Ingrid's maneuver. David left the psychiatric center. "Who was that man?" Gilman asked Gerald. "He told me he was a journalist. He told me about an inheritance." "What is an inheritance?" Gerald responded, acting crazy. Ingrid left the center. She got into the blue Corvette and picked up David. "I advise you not to return to the hotel," said David. "They can locate you if they have written down the license plates." "Of course, I don't plan to go back there," he added. "And your belongings?" asked Ingrid. Ingrid asked, very surprised. "Today, at 6 in the morning, I paid the bill and changed hotels." "But this noon you were eating in the hotel restaurant," Ingrid exclaimed. "The hotel restaurant is free. Stop the car, I'm getting off here." "Tell Leroy to call me," David asked. Ingrid stopped the car and asked, "What hotel are you in now?" "Finding out is part of your job," David responded. Meanwhile, at the county psychiatric center, Dr. Gilman continued to question Gerald Campbell. "He is completely crazy. He won't be a problem. I just have to keep him isolated," Gilman stated. David waited until nightfall and left his new hotel, dressed in a tracksuit and with headphones in his ears. He pretended to be stretching when pressed a button. Gerald received a vibration on the dressing on his wrist and put it to his ear. "I don't want names," David said. "But I still don't know who you are," Gerald answered. "You know perfectly well who I am. You just have to believe it. It's impossible." "It can't be," Gerald continued. "I called you on the phone to rectify a report. I suggested you lower a figure. You did it, but you changed the value. You put 9.7 million instead of the agreed 9.1 million. I didn't say anything, but you failed me on that occasion." "Don't do it to me again," David asked. "My God," Gerald exclaimed. "Only you and I know those figures. What do you want me to do?" "Don't do anything. Don't be impatient. Behave as if everything has affected you for the worse. I don't know who, or how, or when, but I assure you that they will. The password will be the name of the report that we rectify. Now destroy the transmitter and hide the pieces." "See you soon, my friend," said David. "Don't delay," were the last words of Gerald. David returned to the hotel, took a shower, and when he looked in the mirror, he had the sensation of seeing a very tired face. "Am I starting to notice the ears?" he asked himself with a smile on his lips. Chapter 16. Leroy called David. "What happens?" asked. "I'll be back tomorrow," David responded. "And what's so special about that I have to call you? I need you to make me a promise. If I don't get it, you won't see me again. And I don't know what it is, but I think you have something in mind for me." "Stop the ironies. What do you want me to do?" Leroy asked. "I want you to get Gerald Campbell out of the psychiatric center." "Have you gone crazy?" "How do you expect us to do it?" "I don't know, but you will figure out how to do it. Why do you want another unbalanced person on the street? Gerald is not crazy. Can I make you a suggestion?" "Of course." "You'll do it to me anyway," said Leroy. "Send 2 expeditious guys and give the responsibility of organizing the operation to Ingrid." "Okay," Leroy accepted. "What time are you coming back? Mid-afternoon? Tell that to Jennifer. If she can, let her come pick me up at the airport." "Does Gerald know who you are?" Leroy asked. "I think so," David responded. "What we were missing," Leroy exclaimed before hanging up. David arrived in New York at 5 in the afternoon. Jennifer was waiting for him. "Have you solved everything?" she asked. "Completely," he answered. "Have you managed to get a transfer to New York?" she insisted. "I have not requested the transfer. I have presented them my resignation." "Why have you done it?" Jennifer wanted to know. "The main reason has been to be able to be by your side," David said, taking her hand. A shy kiss on the lips put the official seal on a relationship that once would have been impossible. "Am I so important to you?" she whispered. "I have been looking for you for many years, many more than you can imagine," David assured. David had decided to reveal his identity to Jennifer. However, the present moment was so full of magic that he did not dare to break it. The rest of the afternoon, they behaved like 2 lovers. Jennifer accompanied David to Leroy's house. When Martha saw them enter hand in hand, she felt a deep sense of complete satisfaction. "Where is Leroy?" David asked. "Who is Leroy?" Jennifer asked. "It's Glenn's nom de guerre," David explained. "He's not at home." "He's gone to a meeting," Martha reported. "Come to my room," David said to Jennifer. "I want to show you something." "Gee!" Martha exclaimed. "I didn't know you were so direct to the point," she added. "I just want her to meet Popey," David said. "Who is Popey?" Jennifer asked again. "You come with me and don't listen to Martha's bad thoughts." "Where did you get it from?" Jennifer asked. "It's a long story that I promised to tell you another day." "Hey, Martha, where did you say Leroy is?" "At a convention or something like this," answered the hostess. "I need to talk to him." "Find it for me," David said. "It's not possible for me," Martha replied. Jennifer took the moment to say goodbye and disappear. David went down to the basement. He connected to Uncle Sam and entered his password. Leroy's image appeared live on the screen. "We were waiting for you," said Leroy. "Who are you who are waiting for me?" David asked. "You will soon know. In 15 minutes you will have a car waiting for you at the corner that will take you to us. I inform you that Gerald Campbell is currently being released. Your intuition with Ingrid has not failed. You knew that, right?" David said to Martha, "I always know everything and I never know anything. It's my destiny," Martha confessed. "But let me tell you that I am very happy about you. I tell you with all my heart. I leave. The car will be waiting for me," said David to Martha. "Luck. Wish him Martha." David got into the car. The trip lasted 40 minutes. The car stopped in front of a gate. David got out of the car and entered the farm. A path lined with birch trees led him to the front door of the mansion. "Welcome, David," said Leroy. "I have the honor to introduce you to our organization." They entered the mansion. Pale violet fluorescent lights on the floor showed them the way to follow. Chapter 17. David's visit was a surprise to almost all the members of the Rainbow Travelers. The president introduced Dr. David Goodwill. The most applauded phrase of the presentation was, "Dr. Goodwill escaped the tragedy of 9. 11 because his passion was and still is time travel. Glenn Denvers introduced David to all members. But it was engineer-theologian Howard Moore who focused David's attention. "I remember reading a phrase of you that struck me," said David. The article was titled "Science and the Eyes of God," he added. The phrase said, "The human brain is making a lot of progress, but it still uses the word infinite to define the eternal." "I think you overrate me, Dr. Goodwill," Moore answered. After the round of presentations, Glenn dimmed the light in the room and said, "I think you'll like this, David." A three-dimensional holographic image of the interior of an airplane passenger cabin appeared in the room. David could see how Ingrid and Gerald waved. "The plane is flying." "How have you done it?" David asked. "Jeff Richards will explain you on the day you choose," Glenn answered. "Now, I give the floor to Dean Devlin to present his project." Dean Devlin began his presentation by remembering the 178 time trips achieved by all members. He made special mention of Ralph Kingsley's journey in November 1999 to experience the change of millennium in advance in Sydney, Hong Kong, Athens, and London. Then he remembered that the organization's rules only allowed one-way trips to the future and never to the past. The question was that David was on a one-way trip to his future, and I wanted to know if he wanted to return to his past, asked Dean. "Not at all," David answered. "My present disappeared seconds after I left. But I now put on the table the question of whether our group would support a similar initiative," asked Dean Devlin. Opinions for and against continued for more than 3 hours. The last intervention was made by Professor Michael Parker. "I will put David Goodwill back in the spotlight," he said. "Let's imagine that David decides to return, succeeds, and finds himself trapped in the old North Tower again. My doubts are whether it would reach us again." "Without a doubt," answered Glenn Denvers. "And besides, I would be waiting for him at Ellis Island." "It's quite a comfort," David said, smiling. "From your words, David, I gather that you have found someone very special here." "Am I wrong?" said Howard Moore. "No, I don't think so," Howard answered himself. "Your eyes give you away. That expression does not escape an old rocker from the last century." "I'm also from the last century," David answered. "All the more reason, my friend," concluded the scientist and theologian. Chapter 18. The time for voting arrived. The vote was cast secretly but was later made public. David continued to observe everything, very surprised and attentive. Glenn Denvers collected the ballots from the votes cast. The final result was 11 votes in favor and 4 against. Glenn Denvers made public the result and its meaning. "According to our statutes, the proposal is rejected and cannot be raised or debated for 2 years. The meeting ended at 4:27 hours. David got into Leroy's car and began his interrogation. "Why were you on Ellis Island?" David asked. Leroy told him what happened in his routine jump to the future. "Why did you make me go to the Cybernetics Congress?" "So you could meet Jennifer," Leroy acknowledged. "By the way," Leroy added, "I'm driving to the airport. I suppose you would like to receive Gerald Campbell." "What will we do with Gerald?" David asked. "I've already asked Martha to prepare another room for him." "Have you told Jennifer about your odyssey?" Leroy wanted to know. "Not yet. I'm afraid of losing her," David confessed. "Gerald's flight will arrive on time," Leroy informed. "Your voting system is very quirky," David said. "The proposal was rejected after having won by 11-4, David added shortly afterwards. "Indeed. All decisions must be approved by absolute majority or by reject majority. Furthermore, in this last result, that is 14-1, the dissident member is expelled," reported Leroy. "What did you think of Howard Moore?" "It has been an indelible surprise for me," David acknowledged. "And if you allow me a criticism, I will tell you that Dean Devlin has not defended his proposal firmly enough." "We agree," Leroy said. Ingrid and Gerald appeared at the landing door. "I don't want names or introductions," said Leroy, thanking Ingrid for her services and saying goodbye to her. Leroy drove to the house in the Bronx. Martha opened the door quietly. "How are you, Mr. Campbell?" Leroy asked. "I still don't know if it's all a dream," Gerald exclaimed. "You will have to stay at home without going out for a few days, until we resolve the inheritance," David informed. "I don't give a damn about inheritance," Gerald answered. "Are you really David Goodwill?" he asked next. "I leave you alone," Leroy said correctly. The desired moment of confessions began. It was the reunion of two friends that time had managed to bring together in an incredible way. Chapter 19. Several police cars were at the psychiatric center. Dr. Gilman came in screaming like a man possessed. "Who are you?" asked Officer Jason Garcia. "I am the director of this center." "What happened here?" "Here the questions are mine," answered Garcia. "How many inmates do you have currently?" 30 men and 12 women, answered Gilman. "Well, now, you are missing 3 men and 1 of the women," informed the officer. "What happened to the guards?" Gilman wanted to know. "Everything indicates that they have been neutralized without problems," said Garcia. Gilman found out the names of the missing inmates. He became angry when he found out that one of them was Gerald. The police recovered 2 men and the woman. "Tell me the name of the missing man," asked Garcia. "Donald Lewis," lied Gilman. "But he is not dangerous at all. It is possible that he will die and we will never find him," he added. "We will keep you informed as soon as possible," said Officer Garcia. Dr. Gilman rubbed his hands. He would cut off Donald Lewis as if he were Gerald Campbell. Case closed, he told himself. On the East Coast, David was shocked to see how the events at the county psychiatric center had been distorted. A 62-year-old inmate named Donald Lewis had been reported missing due to an attempted robbery. David went up to talk to Gerald. "Who is Donald Lewis?" asked David. "He is an inmate at the psychiatric center who barely speaks." "Well, he is the only one officially listed as missing," said David. "What?" Gerald Campbell asked, very surprised. "That is Dr. Gilman's work," Gerald said, very thoughtful. "Remember that you cannot leave the house yet. Sleep as much as you can. Follow Martha's instructions." When he went out into the street, he could see Jennifer's car parked on the corner. David got into the car and kissed Jennifer. After the kiss, David took Jennifer's hand and placed a ring on her ring finger. "I hope you don't mind driving," David said. "Are you so sure of your feelings?" she asked. "I would do whatever it takes to be by your side. Today I want to tell you a lot about myself." "It's pouring rain," David added. "Where can we talk alone and in peace?" "I know an Irish pub in the New World Trade Center." "Perfect," David answered, convinced that there was no more appropriate place to reveal his secret. Chapter 20. Jennifer couldn't stop looking at her ring. Her gaze was focused on her hands. "What do you think about?" David asked. "I was thinking about where you could have been all this time," she said. "The truth is that if after answering your questions you are still by my side, I will be the happiest man in the world. Has your life been so tumultuous? Have you been married? Do you have any children? Why did you go to California last week?" "You didn't tell me the whole truth, did you?" asked Jennifer. "I have not been married, nor do I have children," David stated, "and you don't have to worry about the California issue. It wasn't a family matter. I just want you to know that I have managed to stop a great injustice and that I am happy about it." "You speak full of enigmatic phrases." "Everything is unknown to me," she said. "I want you to let me tell you my story, and I ask you not to interrupt me no matter how strange and unlikely it may seem to you. If after listening to me you decide to leave, I will understand. It will hurt me a lot, but I will understand." Jennifer's face was a reflection of concern for David's strange preamble. "Please start," she asked. "It was the day of the 2001 attacks. It was the morning you had to have surgery. It was a few minutes after 8 in the morning when I was already working on the 93rd floor of the North Tower. You had just a month to live, and I was already 33 years old." David stood and took a sip. Jennifer's eyes were impossible to describe. The rest of her face was hidden behind her hands. "I was having coffee with my boss and friend, John Carpenter, when everything shook and became chaos. We didn't know what was happening. People wanted to escape but didn't know where to go. We decided to go up. From a window, we saw a plane hitting the South Tower. We go up to the roof. The people were desperate. John was infected by that desperation and jumped into the void. I couldn't help it, and I will never forgive myself." Jennifer was distraught. It was impossible to assimilate everything that David told her, and she began to cry. David hugged her and held her in his arms. After a few minutes, David resumed his explanation. "I appeared in the main tower of the new complex in September of this year, 2029. I tried to take the elevator down and they stopped me. They sent me immobilized to Ellis Island. There I found Leroy, Or, rather, Glenn Denver's. Thanks to Popey, we were able to escape together. Later, I was able to know that he was there, because I had told him about it myself on one of his trips to his future. Wait a minute, Jennifer said, raising her hand. Don't tell me anything else because I am unable to assimilate it. I'm glad you reacted like that, said David. I haven't reacted in any way, David, she told him. I have listened to you, and I do not doubt that your story is true, but do not think that I have accepted it. But thanks to that, we are now the same age, said David. By no means, she protested. You're still 5 years older than me, despite all the cheating you've done. Now I want to ask you something, she said. What do you want to know? David accepted. What did you need the DNA analyzer for? I have imagined 1,001 things, and none of them were good. David briefly explained the topic of Gerald Campbell. What do you think if we go out on the street? He suggested later. Where do you want to go? She asked. I want to return to the walls of memory of the victims. Okay, but first I want you to promise me that while you're with me, you won't go on any of your little quantum trips. In a meeting I participated in yesterday, I already promised it. I said that for me there is only this present. The theologian Howard Moore already guessed that I had found someone very special. Did you know Howard Moore? Does he also belong to that group of... Jennifer stopped. She was going to say crazy, but he changed it to enlightened. I would have liked you to have heard his explanation of the theory of time planes. It was masterful, said David. What a danger, Jennifer finished saying. Chapter 21. The San Diego press confirmed Uncle Sam's information. The only one who escaped from the psychiatric center was Donald Lewis. What do you think of all this? David asked. I think that Dr. Gilman needs to buy time, Leroy answered. But it's tough for him, because I sent Ingrid back to San Diego to keep an eye on him, Leroy added shortly after. What do you think he will try? David wanted to know. I don't know, but we will have to anticipate, Leroy answered. How will we do it? David continued asking. We will make him a proposition that he cannot refuse, Leroy informed. Think that to keep the inheritance they will have to obtain a certificate of incapacity from Gerald. And the law requires it to be a bloods test, Leroy added. Well, it's clear that this Lewis guy won't get over it, said David. Unless we make him believe that there really is a possibility of changing the DNA in the blood, Leroy explained. He's not going to swallow it, David said. Imagine that you receive a communication from the other side of the country that fits you like a glove. What would you do? I suppose to value it with caution, answered David. Why would you have to do it if it bore the seals of the CIA and DOS asking you for confidentiality on the subject? What kind of communication do you plan to send him? David said. An official summons with a round-trip first-class plane ticket inside the summons envelope. Where do you plan to make contact? David insisted. At the hall of the Sheraton Hotel. It's the safest place I know. What will you propose him? David continued asking. I will tell him that we want to secretly carry out a revolutionary experiment to change DNA in a living being. And for this, it has been decided that he does not have a family to avoid subsequent complaints. Then, I will tell him that we have chosen him because of the excellent reports that the San Diego police have sent us. I'm starting to believe it, David admitted. Finally, I will tell him that I will leave the patient's choice in his hands because I do not want to read the heavy medical reports. It will sting. David ended up accepting. Do you want to play a game of freewheel? Leroy asked. Jennifer is waiting for me, David said. Would you like to spend Christmas together, the four of us? I'll ask Jennifer. Thanks for the detail, said David. He went out into the street. Jennifer hadn't arrived yet. A burst of lights warned him of her arrival. How are you? He asked her as he kissed her. I'm fine, but my head won't stop thinking about it. Do you know that you have transgressed all the laws of physics? She said. Maybe so, David acknowledged. Where are you taking me? He asked when he saw the car enter the Lincoln Tunnel. I want to show you where I live, Jennifer responded. When we get there, I'll ask you a couple of questions. Leroy, or Glenn, as you prefer, has suggested that the four of us could spend Christmas together at his house. Good idea. You can now say yes, Jennifer responded. Did you know that Martha did the race with me, and that we lived together in the house that I will now show you? I didn't know anything about all this, David said, somewhat surprised. We have arrived. I think you'll like it, she added. going through the door of the garden fence. The house was decorated simply but tastefully. Jennifer was without a doubt the cherry on top of the decoration. "First question," Jennifer announced. "What are you going to live on, and what do you plan to work on?" "I will do it in the organization in which Glenn is vice president. But you promised me not to do any more jumps," she insisted. "Don't be afraid. I will keep my promise," David assured. "What is your second question?" David wanted to know. "When are you coming to live here with me?" she asked, opening her arms. "Are you sure?" David asked, running towards her. "Completely," Jennifer responded, as the two hugged and kissed each other lovingly. "Furthermore, this will be the consummation of my revenge towards Glenn." "That?" David exclaimed, very surprised. "He stole my partner, and now I steal his," Jennifer added, smiling. "If it's okay with you, I could move after Christmas. It would be great because I have a few days off," she said. "So, we'll spend New Year's Eve here," said David. "We'll both have it alone," he pointed out later. "Do you think they will leave us?" Jennifer asked. "I'll take care of it," David responded. Chapter 22. The holidays were over, and the year 2030 was already a reality. Dr. Gilman entered his office and checked the mail. His eyes focused on an envelope with official letterheads. He opened it and read the letter, written by Leroy. Gilman was surprised. He decided not to say anything to anyone. He put the envelope and all its content in his coat pocket. On the Atlantic coast, it was snowing heavily. David had been summoned by Patrick Emmerich to a meeting. "We want you to join our secret organization. Its name is the Light of Light," said Patrick. "We founded it because the rules of the Rainbow Travelers are too rigid and cannot be changed. I guarantee you that you will not have to do anything you do not want. We are currently the 8 members you see here. You will be the 9th if you agree to join it," said Patrick Emmerich's finished. "I accept." "It is a great honor for me," said David. Applause and congratulations closed the meeting. David returned in Leroy's car. "Has Gilman received the letter?" asked David. "Ingrid confirmed to me that he received it this morning," replied Leroy. "By the way, Gerald is leaving tomorrow. What did you think of his final choice?" Leroy wanted to know. "I find it very clever. The mountains of Idaho will bring him back to life. No one will bother him there. He will enjoy his new identity and the pay he has earned." "You have been magnificent," acknowledged David. "We chose a person with a common name and a stormy past. Then we cross-referenced the information with that of a missing person. And finally, we created the relevant matches. A very solvent law firm finished the job. In the end, justice has been done for Gerald," affirmed Leroy. "Gerald Campbell no longer exists. His name is now James Smith," said David. "You are wrong in your first statement, David. Gerald Campbell is still officially confined in the psychiatric center. We have not yet solved that," said Leroy. "Do you think Gilman will come on Saturday?" asked David. "I am absolutely sure of it. I am betting my pension on double or nothing," affirmed Leroy. "But you are never going to retire," exclaimed David. "That is why I am betting it," answered Leroy. Chapter 23. Dr. Gilman's face, upon hearing Leroy's confidence in their meeting at the Sheraton Hotel, was a poem. The setup was perfect, and Gilman took the bait. They said goodbye until the first week of February. Gilman toasted his luck on the return plane. Leroy called David and told him about the development of the meeting. "Everything has gone according to plan," said Leroy. "Do you think he might have suspected something?" David asked. "I don't believe it. At first he was expectant, but then he gave himself unconditionally," explained Leroy. "When is the test at the San Diego Psychiatric Hospital?" David wanted to know. "The first week of February," Leroy confirmed. "How are you doing tomorrow night for a meeting to approve the incorporation of the 10th member of La Luz de la Luz?" "Impossible," David responded. "I bought a car, and tomorrow I'm going with Jennifer to Washington to test drive it." "Do you want to come with us?" David invited. "It's not possible for me, although I would have liked it very much." "When would the meeting work for you?" Leroy asked. "Next Monday at 7 in the afternoon," David proposed. "Perfect." Leroy accepted before ending the call. Leroy went down to the basement, turned on Uncle Sam, and said, "I inform you that the start of the 3rd phase has been delayed until next Monday at 7 in the afternoon." "Okay. We take note," the voice answered. Leroy went up to the main floor. You have completely forgotten about me, Martha reproached him. At all. I haven't stopped thinking about you, Leroy replied. You've become a compulsive liar, she snapped. Don't you believe me? Well, listen to me well. I had prepared a surprise for you. I just talked to David, and I suggested that tomorrow the four of us could go to Washington to test drive the car he bought, Leroy said. Really? Is what you say true? Martha asked. Call Jennifer right away and confirm it. I didn't do it waiting for your decision, Leroy lied. Martha's confirmation surprised Jennifer. When she told David, he started laughing. Leroy must have changed his mind, said Jennifer. I don't think so. Surely he has been trapped and has chosen a way forward. He's very skilled, said David. Whatever it is, I'm very pleased that they agreed to come with us, said Jennifer. I'm happy too. Especially for Martha, David said. Chapter 24. David arrived on time for the Light of the Light appointment. It was 7 p.m. on Monday, January 21, 2030. Patrick Emmerichs introduced the candidate, Dr. Frederick Newman. David remembered that Leroy had already told him about him. Frederick Newman began his presentation without hesitation. He explained his dedication to surgical laser techniques. He later confessed his passion for time travel, and he ended by recounting what happened in his laboratory. One afternoon, I observed that when a high-intensity laser was applied to adipose tissue of a living being, it disappeared. I went crazy looking for the little guinea pig. It was impossible to have escaped because it was anesthetized. I searched and searched, but everything turned out to be useless. The guinea pig was not in any corner. It was midnight, and I went home. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. At 4 in the morning I returned to my laboratory. I was speechless when I saw the guinea pig starting to move lying on the operating table. My mind ran through all the possibilities but refused to admit what had really happened. These last 2 years I have spent perfecting the technique of these trips. I have 14 experiences registered. I have brought a dossier so that you all can study them. That's all, Frederick Newman finished saying. It's time to ask our guest, said Emmerichs. It will be a real honor for me, Newman responded. Our organization is on the rise, said Leroy. In a few days we have incorporated 2 heavyweights. Next meeting on February 12, here and at the same time, announced Patrick Emmerichs. David got home before Jennifer and prepared dinner. What would my mother say if she could see me? He asked himself as he placed 2 candles on the table. A spontaneous smile confirmed that it was not very difficult to guess the response of Evelyn, his mother. Chapter 25. On Tuesday, February 5th, Leroy landed in San Diego. He showed up at the psychiatric center as Agent Harold Johnson. Dr. Gilman suggested a change in the experiment. What do you plan to propose to us? Asked Harold Johnson. I have tried to find 2 patients with the characteristics you asked for, but I have only found 1. In that case, I have to suspend the experiment, said Johnson. We are not going to contravene anything, explained Gilman. Frankly, I think it is better because we reduce risks, Gilman said. I have to call and ask for authorization, Johnson said. Use my phone freely, said Gilman, getting up and leaving to leave Agent Johnson alone. Harold Johnson wasted no time. He got up and changed the knob on the shelf for another one that had a micro camera. The excellent photographs that Ingrid had sent had been crucial in effecting the change of the knob. Gilman returned to his office. We give the green light to the change you have suggested, Johnson reported. Take note of our instructions, please, he added. The patient must remain sedated for 7 days. That means he can't move, eat, or drink. His only diet should be saline solution administered intravenously. Is this process reversible? Asked Gilman. Yes, we just have to reverse the origin and the objective, Leroy said. The process uses the same technique as that used to obtain genetically modified foods and is carried out by zones. Then the copying begins by an enzymatic method using electrophoresis. The use of thermocyclers allows us to know the exact sequence of the nucleotides of the desired gene, stated Johnson. That is why maintaining the temperature throughout the entire process is important, Gilman admitted with great conviction. One more thing, added Harold Johnson. We do not want to know the identity of the patient. We will only limit ourselves to taking the samples. The process will not be consolidated for 7 days. In the following 3 weeks, you should not perform any tests because the order of the cyclers could change. We will carry out the final analysis on March 8. If you agree, please sign this paper, Leroy asked. Gilman signed the document. Leroy had achieved his goal. The blood sample taken was to certify the identity of Donald Lewis. Chapter 26. On February 12, the meeting of the 10 members of the Light of Light began punctually and normally. The main objective of the meeting to discuss Frederick Newman's studies was put on the back burner. Dean Devlin asked to speak to explain what happened with Scott Evans last Sunday. He threatened me and told me that he knew what we were doing. He warned me that we were going to pay for it with expulsion. Is that all? Asked Emmerichs. I vote not to worry about Scott, said Howard Moore. He is a fanatical purist. History is full of them. The debate with the questions to Frederick Newman and his answers lasted a little more than 3 hours. After the meeting, Frederick returned in David's car. The excuse that he also lived in Jersey City was perfect. I would have liked to meet you in your, let's say, earlier stage, said Newman in a very friendly tone. In that earlier stage, we should have been the same age. But now, Newman didn't finish the sentence. I was always a bit of a nonconformist in those years. But now my situation has changed, David confessed. I guess you've fallen in love, said Newman. Madly, confirmed David. I have to admit that I already knew that. Glenn told me that you've gone to live with Jennifer Bailey. Do you know Jennifer? Asked David. She is my favorite patient. I operated on her when she was a baby. I have seen her a couple of times a year since then. She told me that the attacks delayed her operation. Is it possible that she will have to undergo another operation? In medicine, 2 + 2 is not always 4. But it is true that when we operated on her in 2001, we did not know everything that we know today, said Newman. If you had been able to apply what you know today, would Jennifer be out of danger today? Asked David. It would be much easier for us, admitted Newman without reservation. Let us hope that this does not happen, sighed David, as he left Newman in front of the door of his house. Newman handed him a card full of telephone numbers. I hope you never have to use it, wished Newman. When David entered Jennifer's house, dinner was ready. What is so special about you that I love you so much? Asked Jennifer. Have you forgotten that I am a man from the last century who has been neutralized so that we can meet on equal terms? I don't want to even think about it, Jennifer replied. I have a surprise for you, David announced. Good or bad, she wanted to know. Just surprising, David replied. The 10th member of the Light of Light is Frederick Newman. He hasn't told you anything that could worry you, has he? Jennifer asked. Nothing at all, David replied. I didn't know that man was also involved in that mess, Jennifer commented with a gesture of incomprehension. At that very moment, a phone call crossed the Hudson River to link a house in New Jersey with another in the Bronx. Have you managed to get into the subject? Leroy asked. It hasn't been very difficult, Newman replied. When do you think she might suffer the first symptoms? The checkup last October confirmed all my fears. I don't think she'll make it to Easter without suffering the first warning. Can we consider that today we have closed the 3rd phase? Asked Leroy. Completely, replied Dr. Frederick Newman. We only have the 4th and final one left, said Leroy. Yes, but this is no longer in our hands, commented Newman. That's true. Now everything is in the hands of the traveler, Leroy finished saying before ending the conversation. Chapter 27. Gilman was elated. He had managed to square everything. The expert blood identity test with the judge had been postponed until Wednesday, March 13. On Friday, March 8, Harold Johnson returned to San Diego to carry out the confirmation test of the experiment. When it was over, he left celebrating the success of the test and congratulating Dr. Gilman. He left in the same taxi he had arrived in. A judge friend of Howard Moore had sent a letter to Officer Jason Garcia, explaining suspicions about Gilman. The letter warned that Dr. Gilman had faked an escape to hide the murder of Gerald Campbell. It also said that a group of private investigators had set him up, and that Gilman had fallen for it. It was suspected that Gerald Campbell had been eliminated several years ago, but now they wanted to pretend that he was alive. Captain Jason Garcia was also informed that an agent named Ingrid Tullen would set up a television receiver for him. The letter ended by explaining the relationship between Gilman and Campbell's ex-wife and the issue of inheritance. Leroy entered Jason Garcia's office at the height of Gilman's celebration broadcast. When do you plan to arrest him, Captain? asked Leroy. Right now. I'm going to go and arrest him myself, Garcia said. Will you charge him with murder if you don't find Gerald Campbell? Asked Leroy. Murder, obstruction of justice, deception of the police, fraud against the state, and 100 other crimes, answered Garcia. If you don't find Campbell, how many years must pass before he is officially declared dead? Asked Leroy. 5 years, answered Garcia. What will happen to the inheritance? Asked Ingrid. Most likely, he will go to fatten the state coffers, said Captain Garcia. Take some reinforcements, Captain, recommended Leroy. The world is going to fall on that man. In a second, he will go from glory to absolute misery. His behavior is going to be unpredictable. Let's go after that pig, said Garcia to his men. We're going too, said Ingrid and Leroy. Thousands of miles away, a man was planting corn in a field in Idaho. It was not the best time to plant corn, but he didn't care at all. Chapter 28. Leroy called David and told him the news from San Diego. Can we now call it a day then? David asked. I just sent a coded message to Gerald, said Leroy. You have proven to be a good friend to your friends, he added. You have not been any less so, my friend, acknowledged David. Tomorrow we are going to Philadelphia. Do you want to accompany us? This time it is impossible for me, affirmed Leroy. Say hello to Jennifer for me, he said before hanging up. Without wasting time, Leroy called Frederick Newman. I have a message from you, he said after greeting him. Jennifer came to see me yesterday, explained Dr. Newman. She came to ask me not to tell David anything, he added. Does she know that she is at high risk? Asked Leroy. Not at all. I prefer not to tell her clearly, said Newman. That girl is very smart, said Leroy. Maybe she doesn't know, but I'm sure she imagines it. I know. When the receptionist told me she was coming, I already knew what she was going to ask me for, and I wasn't wrong. Well, she's taking him to Philadelphia tomorrow, said Leroy. I'm worried about what she might ask him to promise. David will do everything for her, unless he has promised her not to do it beforehand, said Newman. But we can't do anything to stop him. We have to trust David's good judgment, said Leroy. I hope so, said Newman, letting out a sigh. It has cost us a lot to get here. We are about to cross the finish line. Now we cannot give up, said Leroy. I was thinking about how the situation has changing, explained Newman. First we jumped for joy when David fell from the sky. Afterwards, we began to design a strategy that until then we had not even dared to consider. Then we saw that there could be a strong friendship between Jennifer and David. When love displaced friendship, we thought we had already achieved everything. And now it may be love itself that closes the door of hope for us, finished saying Newman. Love has no limits or borders, sentenced Leroy. David was happy with Gerald's news. Jennifer was much more restrained. Today was the third time she had suffered discomfort, but it was also the day she had overcome it best. David knew nothing about it. He raised his glass again, toasting the future, and it was then that he realized. He noticed that Jennifer could not lift her left arm. He saw fear in her black eyes and a grimace of disappointment on her lips. Jennifer collapsed from her chair to the floor, and the cup broke into 1,000 pieces without David being able to prevent it. Don't leave me alone, she said unintelligibly. David retrieved Newman's card and called an ambulance. It was not yet midnight when Jennifer was lying unconscious on a stretcher. David was sitting in the waiting room when Leroy and Martha arrived. How is she? Asked Martha. I don't know, but I've seen her in very bad shape, said David. Everything will be fine. Trust Newman, said Leroy. You haven't seen her, repeated David over and over again. More than 2 hours passed, until Newman came out and told them to go into his office. Is she conscious? Asked Martha. She was very nervous, and I preferred to sedate her, informed Newman. In about 2 hours she will wake up. In the meantime, I want to talk to David. If he doesn't mind, you two can stay. David did not open his mouth. As you all know, when Jennifer was a baby, she was admitted with a clear case of cyanotic congenital heart disease. Preoperative ultrasounds indicated that the heart disease was the result of another disease, tetralogy of Fallot, a disease identified by the inversion of the exit of the two large arteries, the aorta and the pulmonary artery. What is Jennifer's real situation? Asked David, very nervous about Newman's rhetoric. Her prognosis is serious, announced Newman. We have to operate on her within the next 48 hours. In the car, you didn't warn me of anything, David reproached. You didn't tell me that all this could happen, he added. I'm doing everything I can, But there is still a new complication that we didn't count on, explained Newman. What are you talking about? Asked David. Jennifer is pregnant. It is an early pregnancy, but it is confirmed. The ultrasounds prove it. My God, David exclaimed. I am to blame for everything that is happening to her. Jennifer has always been very strong, said Martha. But this time she needs help, said Leroy. Please stop, Leroy, said David. I want to see her first, Frederick. Please leave me 10 minutes alone with her. Newman accompanied David to Jennifer's room. She is asleep, but I am sure that if you speak to her, she will hear you. David entered and closed the door. He caressed her forehead and took her hand in his. Jennifer sketched an imperceptible smile. David's eyes were wet with tears and he could not utter a word, but he placed his hand on her belly. He stared at her eyes that were closed. Newman opened the door. David approached and kissed her on the lips. He leaned close to her ear and said, "Read my letter." Then he stood up and walked out the door. He couldn't see 2 tears coming out of Jennifer's eyes. He couldn't hear her say, "Come back, my love." Martha and Leroy were waiting for David. "You're coming to our house tonight," they said. "You and I have to talk," Leroy said. "I have a lot to tell you without playing freewheel. Besides, a good friend of ours is waiting for us." David nodded. The time had come. His time had come. Chapter 29. Howard Moore was the friend that was waiting for. "I'm sorry about Jennifer," he said to David. "We'll need a lot of coffee," Leroy said to Martha. "But don't linger, we need you here." "I won't be long," Martha said. Howard poured himself a bourbon in a tall glass. He didn't add ice. He said it wasn't good to mix the divine with the human. Leroy took the floor. "I'll try to explain everything in order. I ask Howard to help me if I get lost. As you know, David, I met you before you arrived. We didn't know what ties you might have in your past. Newman told me about Jennifer's risk status. From that moment on, the hypotheses began. The idea that you would warn Newman to speed up Jennifer's operation quickly took shape. All we were after was to play that trick on the past. It was a laudable goal masked as a trick. We cared little about what you might do when you returned. We didn't know you," Leroy explained. "Will I be able to come back if I do?" David asked directly. "The answer, without a doubt, is yes." Howard Moore said. "I don't know if you understood my question correctly," David clarified. "What I want to know is whether I'll ever find you all again. The correct answer is still yes." Moore confirmed. "Even if I change a plan from the past," David clarified. "The answer is still yes," Howard Moore assured. "Are you telling me that if I go back and tell Newman, when I come back I'll find Jennifer without the problem she's having now?" "In a way, yes, that's what I'm trying to tell you. But at the same time, I want you to be clear that changing a decision will create new situations that hadn't existed before," he added. "I didn't quite understand that last bit." "What were you trying to warn me about?" David asked. "I'll give you an example. It's a terrible example, but I think you'll understand," Moore said, taking another sip of bourbon. "Imagine you notify Newman and he operates the day before, but changes anesthesiologists and the baby doesn't survive. You'll never again be able to have matching shots of Jennifer. I recognize it's an example of bad taste, but it's clarifying." "I understand," David said. "Who can explain how to contact Newman?" "I'll explain it to you," Leroy said. Martha stood up and hugged David. Howard refilled his glass. Leroy saw a reflection in Martha's hair. "Someone heard our conversation," Leroy warned. "No one we should be worried about," Howard Moore replied. "Let's continue. You just have to send him this letter." "Here's the letter written by Newman," said Leroy. "It contains the necessary instructions and a series of clues that will overcome his initial skepticism." "Are you sure he was at your house those days?" David asked. "Newman is absolutely sure," Leroy said. "Is he talking about me in his letter?" David wanted to know. "Yes, but without revealing your name," Leroy replied. "Now, choose a point in your past you want to return to. It would be helpful if it were a dark place, because the moment you arrive creates a void that goes more unnoticed if there's no light. On Friday, September 7, I took the subway, and when I got to my station, there was a blackout that lasted more than 5 minutes. Can you give us a little more precision?" Leroy asked. "When I got out, I noticed a sign showing the time. It was 6:57 p.m. "We need the coordinates," What subway station was it? Bagan Street, in Brooklyn, David answered. Leroy asked Martha to find out the exact coordinates of the station David had indicated. Where did you surface? Howard asked. Flatbush Avenue, David replied. Now we'll explain the method for choosing the place and time of arrival. I don't want you to show up at the central tower of the new World Trade Center again, said Leroy. What will happen to Popey? Asked David. Popey stays here until you return. Martha will take care of it, Leroy assured him. Howard explained the mechanism for choosing the time and place. Then he gave him the exact coordinates of Leroy's dining room. Keep them in a safe place, he said. Martha returned with the station coordinates. Everyone headed to the basement. David stood in front of the generator and said goodbye to everyone, but he left Martha for the last goodbye. Give this letter to Jennifer if you see I don't return. You are her friend, and I know you will. See you soon, gentlemen. Of the 20th century, Martha said. Leroy pulled the lever. Howard blew a kiss to the sky. Chapter 30. David sighed when he felt back in his neighborhood. He couldn't wait to get home to hug his mother. Remind me tomorrow that I have to post a letter, said David. I hope the recipient understands it correctly, said his mother. You're right. The future I most desire depends on it, admitted David. On Saturday, September 8th, David deposited the letter in the mailbox at the Central Post Office. On Sunday, September 9th, he couldn't resist the temptation and took a taxi to Jersey City. He strolled past the house that years later would become Jennifer's home. A tingling sensation ran through his stomach as he entered Greenville Hospital and asked for a little girl named Jennifer Bailey, room 317. A kind nurse indicated. He went up to the 3rd floor and entered without knocking. Sorry, I think I made a mistake, David said. What's wrong with this precious girl? Are you her mother? He asked. I'm her mother, and I'm worried because she needs surgery. Plus, the doctor has moved the surgery up to tomorrow, Monday. Everything will be fine, he said, stroking the little girl's forehead. Her eyes are closed, but I'd say they're black. How did you know? Jennifer's mother asked. I don't know who you are, but you've given me hope. Good luck. I wish you the best of luck, David said as he said goodbye. As he left, he saw a young doctor giving orders. David also returned by taxi to his home in Brooklyn. He had dinner with his mother and talked with her until midnight. Evelyn was happy with the change in her son. Monday, the 10th, passed uneventfully. In the afternoon, David called the hospital and asked for Newman. He identified himself as the emissary and asked about Jennifer Bailey's surgery. Newman replied that everything had gone well and began asking him questions. David hung up the phone without answering. David invited John to the village for a couple of drinks. They arrived at Kenny's on Bleecker Street. What's her name? John asked. I don't know what you're talking about, David replied. At least tell me if she has blue eyes, John asked. They're not blue. They're beautiful black eyes, David confirmed. The rounds continued until 11 at night. On Tuesday, September 11, 2001, David entered the Whitehall offices at 8:10 a.m. Adopt, Doazeti, Shitreya, May. John came in. How was your night? David asked. Awful. We overdid it yesterday, John replied. I'm going to get some coffee and see if I can wake up. I almost didn't come to work, John said. On the other hand, I was sure you would, David said. It was 8:32 a.m. when John came out into the corridor. At 8:38 a.m., he returned with the coffee and sat down opposite David. You're tense, John said. I don't know what to say, David replied. Those black eyes have affected you too much, John affirmed. I think you're right. This time you've got it right. David couldn't finish the sentence. It was 8:46 a.m. when the entire North Tower shook. Coffee spilled on the table, and screams began to be heard all around. David and John approached the windows on the north side of the floor. A thick black smoke rose from that side. We're trapped, said John. The elevators aren't working, shouted the people running wildly. It's getting terribly hot, John said. That's right. Follow me, David shouted. Which way? John asked. Just follow me, and don't ask questions, David replied. Together they left the north side windows. The smoke made it impossible to see anything. They decided to go to the windows on the south side. It was 9, 2 a.m., when John and David saw a plane approaching from the south side. The plane was flying very low, and its flight direction was unmistakably the South Tower. "What's that crazy guy doing?" John exclaimed seconds before the United Airlines plane crashed into the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. "Did you see that? Do you think the same thing happened in our tower?" John asked. "I'm afraid so," David replied succinctly. "In that case, we have no way out. We're lost," John murmured. "There's always a way out." "Follow me," David shouted. They reached the roof. There were many people on it. "No one can get us out of here." "It's the end," John said. "You've always been such a bigot." "Come with me," David urged. "Not this time." "I've already made my decision," John said. "This time you won't. This time you're coming with me." David grabbed John's arm. "Let's go down." "But where do you want to take me now?" John asked. "I need to introduce you to my girlfriend. She's a beauty with wonderful black eyes." "We have an exit in the antenna's power room," David said. David was still holding John's arm when he looked toward the antenna and saw that the moon was still visible. He paused for a moment and asked, "Tell me, Moon, how long have you been there?" Chapter 31. "John!" a voice shouted from the darkness. "John?" he repeated seconds later. Getting no response, David began to see indistinct shadows. It was then that he heard someone call his name. "John?" he asked again, still unable to see clearly. "David, wake up," he heard again as he noticed someone trying to lift him up and stand. "Leroy?" he finally asked. "Yes, David, it's me. How are you feeling?" "Weak, very weak," David replied, still unable to focus his gaze on a specific object. "It doesn't matter. Now it's only a matter of minutes. Do you know, you've broken all the records?" Leroy said. "What are you talking about?" David asked, still bewildered. "This time, your jump wasn't 28 years. This time you've traveled a little over 42 years, Leroy said. "And Jennifer? How is Jennifer? Where is she?" he stammered. "I'm here," she replied with tears in her eyes.
David felt all his strength return as he hugged her. "You're," he began. "So much older," she said. "Beautiful," he finished.
With his strength restored, David saw Martha and Leroy. Without leaving Jennifer, he walked over and hugged them. "Welcome, gentlemen of the 20th century, Martha said. "How come you're all gathered here?" David asked. "We've been waiting for you," Leroy said. "How long have you been waiting for me?" 2 days. 2 days we've been waiting for your arrival. Today is Saturday, December 13, 2042. "How could you have known I was coming then?" David said. "Do you remember Howard Moore?" Leroy asked. "Of course I remember. How is he?" David wanted to know.
"He died a little over 5 years ago," Jennifer said. "He left us a letter to give to you," she added.
"He gave it to us in an open envelope addressed to you, but he told us we could read it too," Leroy said.
"We've read it more than 100 times," Jennifer said. "But now we want to hear it coming from your lips. It was his last wish. He wanted us all to be together when you read it for the first time," Jennifer said.
"Howard Moore!" David exclaimed. "That man left his mark on me from the time I was very young." "That man left his mark on all of us," Leroy said. Martha walked over and handed him the letter. David felt an immense sense of peace wash over him and ran his finger over the letters of his own name. Then he took a deep breath and began to read. "When you read these words, my greatest wish will have been fulfilled. You'll wonder if it's necessary to be alive for that. The answer is yes, but it's not always essential. In the following lines, you'll find a chronological account. I assure you this is an exact copy of my personal journal. Finally, I just want to let you know that I'm sure we'll see each other again. A big hug, Howard." David continued reading excitedly. "Saturday, March 9, 2030, David has just departed on his return trip. The arrival coordinate beam points to this location. This ensures that when he returns, he'll appear in this room. I've noticed the energy consumption has been low. I think I know why, and it scares me. I need to check what I wrote a few years ago, when the house that now belongs to Leroy was my own home. Tuesday, April 8, 2008. I was very surprised to see a man materialize in a corner of this room. The man is very weak. I don't know if he'll be able to hold out for long. His clothing is normal. Wednesday, April 9, 2008. I've canceled all my appointments. I'm staying with the man who just arrived. He seems to be recovering, albeit very slowly. I need to know where he came from. Thursday, April 19, 2008. We've made progress. He's starting to talk. I think I've understood his name is John. Sunday, April 20, 2008. His name is John Carpenter. The story he tells is mind-blowing. He says he was trapped in the Twin Towers. He doesn't know what happened to him. He says he was with a friend named David. He gets very upset when I talk to him about this. Friday, April 25, 2008. John has died. I have fulfilled his last wish. I scattered his ashes in the Hudson River. Saturday, April 26, 2008. I just got back from Ground Zero. I checked out John's story. Everything he told me was true. He worked at a company called Whitehall. One of his assistants was David Goodwill. They're both on the official list of victims. Why did John Carpenter show up at my house? I hope I'll find out the answer someday. Wednesday, December 12, 2029. Leroy told us about David Goodwill today. My heart skipped a beat. I hope I was good enough to hide it. I don't want to give away my secret for now. Saturday, December 15, 2029. I met David Goodwill. He claims to have traveled alone. I don't think that guy is lying. But then, I don't get it. I'm still going to keep John's secret to myself. Monday, March 18, 2030. I think I have a good idea why. What happened. Jennifer's surgery at Newman's hands was a success. She will recover without any after effects. What I don't know is what will happen when she finds out that David may never be able to return to our time. Thursday, March 21, 2030. I have called Emmerichs to call a special meeting of the Rainbow Travelers. My conclusions indicate that David will not be able to return. I have to convince them so I can send him help. Friday, March 22, 2030. The meeting lasted until dawn. My proposal was approved by an absolute majority, but the first volunteer to hold it was Scott Evans. I was forced to vote in favor, but I don't trust him. He will depart tomorrow on a 48-hour trip. On Monday the 25, we'll meet to learn about his adventure. Tuesday, March 26, 2030. Scott hasn't returned. I don't know what to think. I never fully trusted him. Friday, April 5, 2030. Scott still hasn't returned, and I don't think he ever will. I'm certain he never contacted David. Perhaps he didn't even try. I'd like to think he didn't do anything irreparable to him. Thursday, August 15, 2030. The Rainbow Travelers have disbanded. For the time being, all activities have been suspended. I'm going to continue studying what happened. I sense that the definitive explanation is near. I'm not going to give up. Friday, July 23, 2032. I already know what happened, and I also know what will happen. I've checked the body masses of John and David. Your study has opened my eyes. I'm convinced David will return to us. He will, even if it's too late for me. I'll tell Jennifer, Leroy, and Martha. But first, I want to put my conclusions in writing. Conclusions? David tried to save John on his second attempt. We were the ones who established the point of arrival. That's why John Carpenter showed up at my house. My theory is that neither the mass nor the distance to the energy source was the same for both of them. John was the most affected, and that's why he arrived first. David only absorbed the remaining energy, and his journey was extended in space-time. Tuesday, September 21, 2032. I've finished my calculations. David will arrive between December 11 and 25, 2042. Friday, June 19, 2037. I feel my time is coming. I'm sorry I can't greet David in person. Hugs to everyone. It was 11:15 p.m. when David finished reading Howard's letter and began to put it back in its envelope. This had been the first time, but he was convinced he would read it many more times. Everyone remained absolutely silent, expressing deep respect for Howard Moore. The silence was broken when a small figure appeared in the doorway, rubbing its eyes. "Mom," she said in an almost heavenly voice. "Tell me, honey," Jennifer replied. "Is Dad home yet?" she asked next. "Yes, darling," Jennifer confirmed, her voice breaking. "Hello, Dad," the little girl said matter-of-factly. "Hello, darling. What's your name?" David asked, as he hugged her. "I'm 12 years old, and my name is Evelyn. Mom explained that the name is in honor of my grandmother." David looked at Jennifer with deep recognition. He held out his hand for her to join them. Leroy breathed, trying to contain his emotion, and Martha continued to cry uncontrollably. "Where have you been all this time, Dad?" "Traveling," David managed to answer. "Will you tell me everything you've seen on your travels?" "Yes, darling. Of course I will," David replied. "Will you go on another trip, Dad?" the little girl asked.
"No," Jennifer answered, anticipating David. "Dad stopped traveling. You promise us, right?" "I promise," David agreed, smiling.
At that moment, the people to whom he owed his being here came to mind. Evelyn Goodwill, his mother, John Carpenter, his friend, Howard Moore, his teacher. He looked up to heaven and smiled again. He was comforted by the thought that soon he would have the chance to see them all again. All of them, without exception. End of the first novel of the trilogy, A Future in the Past, by Francisco Zaragoza Esbrí.